Yisrael Weiss came and knocked on my screen on my sliding door yesterday.
Yeah.
He's like, just want to see if I could I put up like our little sukkah in the back here. Just seeing if I could use it for some coffee in the morning or whatever. And I'm like, kind of a question. Of course you could use it. It's like he used to have one, and there was a firm guy on the board of the HOA of the building. So he's like, he didn't have a problem. But since his mom lives here and he's here all the time, he doesn't want to cause problems by putting up another one, because apparently they don't want sukkahs to be up. I'm like, well, I just moved in. No one told me anything yet. And it's not my place. And I'm probably not going to be here longer than a year. Mitzvah Shem, I get my own place or something. And if they tell me to take it down, I have a week to take it down.
He's an awesome guy. You should bring with him. He's an awesome guy. Anyway, so yesterday we began this mimer. Mimer is it's from 40 years ago, and it's based on the pasuk in Sukkot. You should dwell 7 days. Every Jewish citizen should sit in a sukkah. We asked the question: what's the point of the Torah repeating itself in this same verse twice? The first part of the verse is seemingly something that everyone has to do. All the Jewish people have to sit in the sukkah for 7 days. So why repeat this again in the second half of the verse and say every Jewish citizen should sit in the sukkah? What's the point? And if the point is, as the Gemara says, is to tell us that all Jewish people are able to sit in one sukkah, called ezek, so yesh sukkah, the extra word call, all, indicates the inclusive nature of the sukkah. If that's true, it could have used that word call in the first half of the verse. It could have said, in the sukkahs, all Israel should dwell for 7 days. Why you bring that whole second half of the verse in the first place? Another question we had was the reason the Torah switches from the third person to the second person. It starts off with, you should dwell in the sukkah, the second person, for 7 days. Then it says in the third person, in all of Israel, every Jewish citizen shall sit in the sukkah. All of a sudden switching to third person. Why does it switch? And so to understand this, we started also talking about Luvan Esrog. How come Luvan Esrog has to be done specifically in the sukkah? And what we started to say, we didn't explain it yet, is that the sukkah and Luvan Esrog are all about the theme of unity. So to understand this, we began explaining two seemingly opposite themes in the midst of sukkah. On the one hand, a sukkah is meant to be a temporary dwelling. And that's why a sukkah which is above 20 amas is in kosher. On the other hand, a sukkah is supposed to be our permanent dwelling on sukkahs. It's supposed to be a permanent home. But on the other hand, our permanent home should be in a temporary dwelling. We're trying to understand what's the inner meaning of this, of having a permanent home and a temporary dwelling. So to understand it, so we looked in the Zohar. The Zohar says, Zeis HaTorah Adam, whatever exists in the Torah is in man. That means there's something about our lives and ourselves that has these two components of permanence and temporary. And that will give us some insight into the sukkah as well. What are the two components in our life that are both permanent and temporary? So first of all, every person is always changing. Both there's a concept of changing in the positive sense, and the Torah tells us to always go from strength to strength, go higher and higher. So there's a element of positive change. On the other hand, Hashem also made the world in a way that there could be a negative change. Hashem made the world in a way that He says, I give before you life and goodness, death and evil, and you have to choose. He gave us this choice because He wants us to have the feeling of achievement and accomplishment. But bottom line is, it's possible to change and to descend. It's possible to make mistakes. So there, although a human being, although a Jew is made by the hands of God, and therefore we are more naturally associated with the infinite than the finite, because we are like Adam. Just like Adam was made by the hands of God, so too every Jew has this element in him as being made by the hands of Hashem. So Shalom Aleichem, Dr. Bressman. So happy you could join us this morning.
Boy, I'm happy to join us this morning.
So you're home?
I'm home.
How are you feeling?
Like death warmed over.
Death warming over?
Yeah, death warmed over.
Oh my God. Dr. Bressman,
I've never heard that saying before. I don't even know what that means.
It's not a good thing.
not a good thing. Dr. Bressman, I love you very much, and I want to wish you a full shlema. Chaim Pertz and Basha, and gesund stark. We need you in this world. There's nobody like you in this world. Got to be gesund.
Amen.
All right, thank you.
So let's continue learning in your zchus. So on the one hand, a human being is someone who is naturally a Jew, is naturally connected to the infinite. God created Adam alone by himself because God wanted Adam to, and every Jew to know that just like Adam was created alone, so too the whole world is created for you. The whole world depends on you. And that's why, just like Adam was called made by the hands of God, every Jew also has a similar component in him, made by the hands of God, and therefore there's something eternal about us. On the other hand, we are finite, we're always changing. So you see the two elements of Sukkah, the idea of permanence, the idea of change in us. Just like the Sukkah is supposed to be a permanent dwelling, and yet it's supposed to be a flimsy dwelling that can change, that's not permanent. So to ourselves, we find that there's two opposites. So, and just like this is true within ourselves, we also find this in regards to the mitzvahs we do. Mitzvahs are called garments. Mitzvahs, just like a sukkah is meant to be it says in the code of Jewish law, in the Talmud, a sukkah is meant to be a protection from the heat, and not a home, which is a protection also from rain and wind. So through our mitzvahs, we're able to sit in the Sukkah of Hashem, we're able to be surrounded by Yiddishkeit. My great-grandfather loved this sukkah. He wouldn't leave the whole sukkah. He just loved it. It's great. He said, my neshama is pumping. I just came from Kippur. My neshama got all cleaned up. Now let's just bring the whole sukkah. He was just sitting in the sukkah. Anyway, so that's what you're supposed to be in the sukkah, surrounded by Yiddishkeit, surrounded by good things. But mitzvahs have these two components in them. On the one hand, mitzvahs are the mitzvahs of God, which means they're infinite. There's something infinite about mitzvahs. The Torah says, your mitzvahs are very broad. They're beyond. They don't have limitations. Each mitzvah is infinite. And that's why the Torah says it's very broad. The word very in Chassidus, in the Torah, every word in the Torah is a word which is of absolute truth. You can't say very much if there's something more. So when we say the mitzvahs are very wide, very broad, very big, they're the biggest. If it's not the biggest, then it's not very broad because there's something broader than it. So on the one hand, mitzvah is an infinite thing. On the other hand, mitzvahs are limited. There's a certain number of mitzvahs. You can't have less mitzvahs. You can't have more mitzvahs. Mitzvahs have a limitation, just like we do. So that's why the Torah says they're protection from both rain and wind. And Zev, our Kabbalists, will love this, that rain and wind, these two words are associated with the number of mitzvahs that we have. The number of rain is one more than 248, it's 249, and the number of wind is 247. So keeping the mitzvahs, when you're surrounded by mitzvahs the way you're supposed to be, which means not adding, not subtracting, so then that's a protection from rain and wind. And although there are negative mitzvahs as well, but the point isn't that we shouldn't make mistakes. So the point of creation was not to make mistakes. No one is making any mistakes in heaven. That's not the goal. The goal is the stuff that we do. So the neshama comes to this world to do something. And that's what's novel about this world. That's what we can accomplish. So to become a partner with Hashem in creation and make the world the best that it can be. So by doing mitzvahs the way you're supposed to do them, we're protected from all negative things from the rain and the wind. So mitzvah has infinite in it. It's the mitzvahs of God. On the other hand, mitzvah has finite in it. It's a number of how many, how shouldn't be more, shouldn't be less. So all of our lives are similar to sukkah. Like just like God said about himself, I will walk in a sukkah. So too, our whole life is like a sukkah. On the one hand, it's a temporary dwelling, because first of all, the Talmud says, this world is like a hallway. it precedes the palace. Prepare yourself in the hallway before you get in the palace. The palace means the world to come. So it's not something that's permanent, something which is always changing. The world, the one consistent thing we have in our life is the world is always changing. There's a change in the positive sense, getting better and better. And there's also a possibility for a change in the negative. But in this world, which is temporary, and it's constant change in the world, which indicates its limited nature, its limited power, Hashem wants us to make something permanent in this world. Hashem wants us to, just like in a sukkah, we're supposed to live permanently in the temporary dwelling. So every Jew is supposed to have permanence in the service of Hashem. Heard a story this past Shabbos. Unfortunately for Zev, he stayed with it for ringing too long, so it could be he knows the story also. Actually, I think he left before the story. The previous Rebbe, when he was a child, he was on a train with his parents, and his yarmulke fell off, and it went on the steps of the train while the train was in full motion. And he went to climb on the steps to get his yarmulke, and his mother screamed, "What are you doing?" And he said to his mother, "I should go without a yarmulke." So that's the idea of, you're that one, right, Zev? Heard this story? Yeah. So that's the idea of permanence. Permanence means that it can't be another way. That we have to look at our Yiddishkeit and say, I can't be without this. It doesn't matter what's going on. Like Dr. Bressman, I don't know if you heard, but just like you're in quarantine right now, I am too. My Yisraelik just got symptoms and positive test yesterday. So join the club, I guess. I'm joining the club. Yeah. So although changing is a change, right? But although there's a change, Hashem wants that despite the changes, that our Yiddishkeit, our sukkah, our simcha and sukkah should be something which is unchangeable. Hashem wants us to be unshakable and steadfast in a place of change. So it says in the Torah, for example, that everything you do should be for the sake of Hashem. It says, in all your ways you should know Hashem. That's referring to the mundane. Your ways, your things, it's always supposed to be connected, although it's always changing. And for sure, Torah mitzvahs, in the simple sense, it's supposed to be a permanent thing. It's supposed to be something that it can't be any other way. We're supposed to make a home for Hashem himself, which is the idea of a permanent dwelling in a temporary space, which means that we can't let go of our role here. We have to feel that whatever our role is, that has to be this way. And just like we find about Yaakov Avinu, it says about Yaakov made a home for himself, and for his cattle, he made huts. So Chassidus explains that all the matters of the world, his cattle, for him, that was just huts, that was just temporary dwelling. For himself, for his Yiddishkeit, for the things which are important, that was his house. That was something that was permanent to him. And Yaakov merited that So for Yaakov, his home was the world to come. Yaakov, he didn't consider this world to be his goal. The goal was the world to come. The goal is the spiritual. And Yaakov actually merited, as did Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that Olamcha tireh b'chayecha. They were able to see the world to come in their lifetime. While they were souls and bodies, while they were learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, they were able to achieve this permanence, this attachment to Hashem in a way that they couldn't move from that place, chas v'shalom. They wouldn't budge from their steadfastness in doing their mission in this world. And not only did they do their mission and not let go of it, but they also were able to achieve this idea of being mahalchim. Mahalchim means they're able to go from strength to strength. And not just to go from strength to strength, but to leap from one level to another level. So although we're talking about leaping from one level to another level, doesn't mean that there was change. Because, as it says in the Talmud, when you have $200, within the 200, you have $100. Within the higher level, you have all the lower levels. So although we're saying that Avram and Yaakov, they were able to achieve going higher and higher, doesn't mean that they didn't have permanence in their service of Hashem, because they always had level number one. They always had the level they started on. So that's why we call their service of Hashem something which is permanent. Yaakov, in this world, he merited to see the world to come. He merited to see the spiritual and the goal as what his life is about. And all the physical things were for him just a sukkah, just a hut, just a temporary thing. So through our efforts and the efforts of all the Jewish people in this world, in the time of Golus, this prepares us for the time of the coming Mashiach. Concerning the coming Mashiach, it says, all flesh will see that the word of Hashem is speaking. Chassidus emphasizes that for the neshama to see Hashem, you don't need Mashiach. What's unique about the coming Mashiach is the physical flesh will see Hashem. And the reason why the flesh will see Hashem, our bodies will see Hashem, not just our eyes, but the physical flesh itself will feel and perceive godliness. The reason this will happen is because in the time of exile, the focus is to learn Torah and do mitzvahs with the body. And therefore, it is the body that will see Hashem. As the Torah says that when you learn Torah, you're supposed to learn Torah in a way that your whole body is involved in learning Torah. As it says in the Gemara, if when you learn Torah, your whole body is involved in Torah, then the Torah will be preserved in you and you won't forget it. So how much more so the mitzvahs we do are supposed to be done in the way that our whole body is involved in the mitzvah. So not only will the body perceive godliness too, because it is the tool with which we kept our mitzvahs throughout the exile, but more, the body will impact the neshama. Because of the body, the neshama will perceive godliness in a greater way than it did in the exile. How so? The neshama, that doesn't explain over here, but elsewhere it says that vivid vision is something associated with the body. So because in a body will see godliness in a vivid way that you can see with your physical eye, which is in a way is more vivid than seeing something spiritually, that will enhance the neshama's vision of godliness as well. So that's what will happen in the future. But nowadays, before Mashiach comes, or I should say today, this moment, before Mashiach comes, it shouldn't be nowadays, it should be this day we should see Mashiach. So we already have that. Although we only will see this Mashiach will come, but we already are creating this reality now. And that's what the Gemara says, it's better to do mitzvahs and tshuva for one moment in this world than to have life of the world to come forever. But now it's not something that we could see. In the language of the Rebbe Marash, whose anniversary of passing was yesterday, the Rebbe Marash said that it's like having something in a closed box. You have diamonds in the box, but the box is closed. But you have the key. And any moment you want, in any hour, any moment, you're able to open that box and see it open. So it depends on you. You're able to be like our forefathers who could see the world to come in their lifetime. Just like our forefathers, they were able to taste the world to come while they were alive. As Chassidus says, they're called forefathers because whatever they had, they bequeathed to all their children. A father bequeaths to his child everything that they have. So that means we have the full inheritance of our forefathers in us. I was learning yesterday in chapter 18 in Tanya. Chapter 18, the Alter Rebbe talks about how come we all have love for Hashem. It's because we're all inheritors of Avram. And Avram Avinu achieved through his service of Hashem, his perfect service, to bequeath to all of his descendants this love for Hashem. And to have the Chachma Shema Nefesh, to have this absolute clarity about godliness, he bequeaths this to all Jews in all generations. So we're able, if a person serves Hashem in a perfect way, which he's able to because he's a grandson of Abraham, he's able to achieve a perfect vision of the future now. But until that happens, you still have it. It's still there. Our forefathers merited to see it, and that's also possible for every one of us to be able to open up that box where our mitzvahs are. And that's why the Torah says all Jewish citizens will sit in the sukkah. Why does it use that word citizen? So the word citizen, Ezrach, it means I will shine. It's talking about the way that the neshama will shine after we serve Hashem throughout the exile. How after the world will be the way it's supposed to be, the world will be fixed the way to be the way Hashem wants it to be. So the Torah says that even before Mashiach comes, in your world, you're able on Sukkot to take that futuristic vision and have that in your sukkah. You create your sukkah through your mitzvahs, through your Torah. You're surrounded by the Yiddishkeit you do all year in your sukkah. There's something for 7 days, which 7 days encompasses all of time. There's something of what will shine in the future in that sukkah. And it's in a way that the Torah says you will sit in the sukkah, which means it's not just something that is hovering over you and it's just like transcendent and heebie-jeebie and not tangible. You're able to live with that for a week. The Torah says with that godly light that will shine when Mashiach will come, it's with you in the sukkah in a way that it's permanent and you're living with it and you're sitting with it. Which is why it's better to bring better things in the sukkah than other things. FYI. If we can't sleep in the sukkah, how much more so should we not do? The sukkah should be a holy place, be a place where we bring chassidus and Torah and for brain. Okay, so the rant is now over. Continuing on. Now, the way the Torah describes the second half of the verse, sitting in the sukkah as a citizen, is different to the way the Torah describes sitting in the sukkah in the first part of the verse. In the first part of the verse, it says, in sukkahs you shall dwell for 7 days. In the second half of the verse, it says, every Jewish citizen shall sit in the sukkah. It doesn't mention the number of days in the second half of the verse. Why? Because the second half of the verse is talking about the way the world will be when Mashiach will come, which is beyond the number 7, beyond time. The first half of the verse is talking about how we create a home for Hashem spiritually in all of time and all of space through our efforts in a time of Golus. The second half of the verse says, and therefore you could see some of that now. As the Baal Shem Tov says, that the word Ezrach is referring to the loftier parts of the neshama. There are 5 names that the neshama has: Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida. And the Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama are internal. They're the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we do. That's Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. That's the more internal parts of our neshama. Then there are Chai, Yechida, the more transcendent and loftier parts of the neshama. So the Torah says the Ezrach part of the neshama, the higher part of the neshama, the part of the neshama that will shine when Mashiach will come, it should sit in a sukkah. Even though it's something about the future, it's in your yechida, you're able to already sense that future. Your yechida already is there. So that's the emphasis of the second half of the verse, how we're able to sense and feel, and it shines in us something of the future in that sukkah. And that's why the Talmud says we can only learn from the second half of the verse. We asked in the beginning of the discourse, you could have added a word to the first half of the verse. You want to talk about all the Jewish people sitting in the sukkah. Why does the Torah say only about the second half of the verse? That second half of the verse teaches us that all the Jewish people can sit in the sukkah. Because there's something futuristic about that sentiment. The Torah says that each of us is an inheritor of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We're all the same in that sense. On the other hand, there are 12 tribes. And more, not only there are 12 tribes, that everybody has their path. So, and just like the Torah says about the menorah, that there's 7 candles in the menorah, and they correspond to the 7 days of Sukkot. So there's a way that everyone does their role in serving Hashem. But just like in the menorah, all the 7 candles have to face the middle. So too, the Jewish people, although everyone has their role and everyone has a different way of serving Hashem, and that's why there are 7 days of Sukkot corresponding to the 7 different ways and all 7 components of time and space, and every person has their mission. But just like the menorah, all the 7 candles have to face the middle, so too there's something we all have in common. As the Rambam says, that every Jew, in every situation he may be, always wants to do the right thing. He always, even before he does tshuva, and he says, I don't want to listen to the Jewish court. I don't understand what they have to say. He's still within himself. After they beat him up, and he says, okay, I'll do what you asked me to do. The Rambam says that's what he wanted to do the whole time. That's his neshama. And although that's his deepest desire, but it's in a way that has now become revealed in his speech, and he says, I want to do this, and it affects his action. There's only two halachas where the Torah says you force the guy. One halacha is the laws of divorce. You force the guy until he says, I want to give the divorce. And there's another halacha. Anyone know the second halacha? Points? You know the second halacha? No one knows the second halacha. The second halacha is the laws of sacrifices. When a person donates a sacrifice and he says, I changed my mind, you force him to bring that sacrifice. But the way you force, he has to say, I want to bring the sacrifice. So it says in the Torah that you should bring the sacrifice according to your desire. And therefore he has to say, I desire. Because if he doesn't say he desires, it's not kosher. But the Rebbe learned something very fascinating about the words in the Torah. Unbelievable. The Rebbe says things in a discourse, parenthetically. We can make it a whole discourse, but every line in the discourse, every parenthetic line could be a whole discourse. It says in the Torah, you should slaughter the animal according to your desire. So we learn from those words that you have to bring the animal as a sacrifice with your desire. You have to agree to bring the sacrifice. Another verse indicates you should be forced. Therefore, the Torah says you force the guy until he says, I want to do it. So it says, when you shecht something, when you shecht the Yetzer Hara, after you shecht the Yetzer Hara, then your inner desire comes out. So I guess shechting the Yetzer Hara, who coerce you to say, I don't want to do the Avera, I don't want to bring the sacrifice, rather, when that part of you is hammered out by the Jewish court telling you got to do this or else. So then your inner desire is revealed because the Yetzer Hara has now been shechted to some extent. So this element in us, the part of us that wants to do all the mitzvahs, the part of us which will be revealed in the future, the deepest part of us, that's what unites us. And so although there is a difference between mitzvahs that are done by the Kohen and Levim, Dr. Bressman is very jealous whenever me and Zev go out, when they announce, and let the Levim wash the hands of the Kohanim, and you're stuck over there, but you love to be part of our group. I remember some Israelim which actually walk outside just to see this. They just want to watch how the Israelim the Levim wash the Kohanim. Anyways, so although there are differences, but and there's also differences between men, women, and children. But if we talk about the deepest part of the neshama, we're all the same. Every Jew is a part of Hashem, a part of the essence, part of God. And just like it says about God, that God is simple, without any division, so too the Jewish people become one entity. That although we are in a state of division, and there's 7 days of Sukkot, but the element within us, deepest part of us, which in that level we're all united, that affects us, so that we're all able to be in one sukkah because we have a sense of the future already now. In other words, the reason why we're able to unite together in one sukkah, we're able to get together. Why is that? Because there's something in the sukkah which is about the future and from the future. And therefore, and that is the part of us which is all the same. And therefore, we're all able to sit in one sukkah. And that's why it's specifically the second half of the verse, which talks about the part of the neshama which could sense the coming of Mashiach already today, which could feel in the sukkah the future of the coming of Mashiach. That's the part of the verse which teaches us that we're all able to be in one sukkah, because that's the part of the neshama which unites us. And that's what I wanted to share for today. Any questions or comments? And hey, I have an idea, Dr. Bressman. Since I have to get positive, I guess, or do this idea, but if you be positive and I be positive, we could dance all night together, right? Isn't that how it works? Anyways,